guys, it's Alexis, aka This Author, and I'm here today to talk about some of my favorite book adaptations. These aren't just necessarily movies, some of these are TV shows, some of these are musicals, and some of these are also video games. So these are just book adaptations that I personally really love. I also want to mention that for a few of these, I think it's only maybe 1, 2 or so, I haven't actually read the book for. I've just experienced the adaptation, but I love the adaptation so much that I don't feel like I need to necessarily love the source as much as I love the adaptation. But for the most of these, I will have read the actual book that it corresponds with. So yeah, so I figured let's just go ahead and get into it. I'm gonna start with both one of my favorite books and one of my favorite movies, and that is the Pride and Prejudice adaptation, the one starring Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen. This was actually my first introduction to Pride and Prejudice. I had seen this movie, had no clue it was based on a book, and I saw this movie like when it was brand new, so I was only about 10 or 11. I was years away from reading Pride and Prejudice in school. But I fell in love with this movie, and it was a favorite movie of mine before I read Pride and Prejudice, and since I have since read Pride and Prejudice, I've only fallen more in love with the movie, because I just think that the acting in this movie and the mood of this movie just fits the novel so well. I just think Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen sell Elizabeth and Darcy so well that I feel like every time I watch this, I'm like so in love with them and their relationship and their characters. And yeah, I just think that this particular adaptation, I have seen several other adaptations of this one, such as the one that stars Colin Firth, but this one's still my favorite. The mood of this one just fits the story to me so well that I love it so much. The next one I'm going to mention is The Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt, which is adapted from Andrzej Sapkowski's The Witcher series, the first book being actually a collection of novellas titled The Last Wish. I have not actually read the Sapkowski books, which came before the Witcher trilogy was ever made into a video game, but I would be lying if I said that my love for the third game in the series, The Witcher 3, which is critically acclaimed, you pretty much won't find a bad review about it because it's a really amazing game. It has totally sparked my interest in reading the books because I would love to see where this story started, you know, and I would love to get to know Geralt and the Witcher world from the beginning. But to talk about the game, there's so many things I love about the game. I'm talking specifically about The Witcher 3. I haven't played either of the first two Witcher games, but The Wild Hunt is so many layers of incredible. The soundtrack in it is amazing. I listen to the soundtrack all the time. The graphics are incredible, and how the characters are created and the character models, they are so expressive, and you can't help but just fall in love with every character in this story. I love the combat in the game. I think the combat is a little frustrating sometimes, but it's also really fun, especially as you get higher level in the game. And I just think the story overall is just really gorgeous, and I love that you're free to make choices in the game. And just, I fell in love with The Witcher 3 when I first discovered it, and it has made me only more interested to read Sapkowski's original works. The next one I'm going to mention I think is a pretty popular adaptation in the YA community, and that is the Hunger Games film franchise, based obviously on the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins. I'm a big fan of the trilogy, but I have to admit I love the movies. When the first one came out, I think a lot of people were unsure of how it was going to be, but I ended up really falling in love with the trilogy and going to see every movie as a midnight premiere with my friends. I loved seeing the actors in this trilogy really find themselves within the characters, and I feel like everybody in this cast really helped bring their character to life. I fell in love with Josh Hutcherson playing Peeta. I loved Sam Claflin playing Finnick. Jennifer Lawrence did a really great job with Katniss, and Katniss is a character I really love, so like it means a lot for me to say that I think Jennifer Lawrence did an amazing job bringing Katniss to life. But I also just think so much of what happens in this trilogy translates so well to film. The Hunger Games themselves and the war that inevitably ends up happening, I think all of that looks so good on cinema, and I think that they did a really good job bringing a lot of that to life within the limitations of, you know, trying to make a film. And yeah, I really do. I love the Hunger Games film trilogy. The next one I'm going to mention is actually two adaptations off of the same book, and that is Chuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. So of course I'm talking about both the early 2000s film starring Alexis Bledel, as well as the musical that came out a couple years ago. Chuck Everlasting is one of my favorite books, and I find that I fall in love with every iteration of this. So I saw the film when I was younger, much younger, and I loved it. And I went and saw the musical with my friend Ben, who were both big musical people, and I fell in love with it. And I just love the story so much that I love every translation of it. I think the music for the musical is phenomenal, and so many of the songs in that musical totally help to portray a lot of the emotions that are captured within Chuck Everlasting, relating to, you know, the different members of the Tuck family. But I also think the movie did a really good job of making it into more of a love story by aging Winnie Foster's character up a lot. But I think that there's so much more of a love story in the movie adaptation that I really love. Just how atmospheric the movie is, because it's magical, but it's old-timey at the same time, and I just really love it. And I love Tuck Everlasting. I love every iteration of Tuck Everlasting. I probably will love it if they made it a TV show or a cartoon or anything. I would fall in love with it because I just love the story so much. The next one I'm going to mention is another one where I haven't read the book, but I love the adaptation, and that is Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. I'm of course talking about the Starz miniseries that came out years ago. I filmed an entire video just about my favorite TV shows, and this was on it because I fell in love with the Pillars of the Earth TV show the first time I ever saw it. I love all the mise-en-scene that's in that film, or that's in that TV show. So I just love all of the actors and the costuming and the setting, and again, the cast is amazing. It's got Matthew McFadyen, Rufus Sewell, Eddie Redmayne in one of his large roles that he first got, and I fell in love with it. It was the first time I fell in love with Eddie Redmayne. I've already been in love with both Matthew McFadyen and Rufus Sewell for their previous works in historical fiction movies, and I just think that the whole cast really kills it, and I think that the way that they tell the story in the limited time that they have in a miniseries, I think was so successful and so well done and so compelling that I love the Pillars of the Earth miniseries adaptation so much. It's one of my favorite TV shows. If you haven't seen the miniseries, I highly recommend it because it's so good. The next one I'm going to mention is the Phantom of the Opera musical, obviously adapted from Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. And basically, Phantom of the Opera was one of the first musicals I ever got into as someone who loves musical theater. It was it's the only musical I've ever seen with my mom. I brought her with me to see it when we went on vacation in Vegas, so it's special to me in that way. But Phantom of the Opera was one of the first musicals that I ever got into, that I ever committed to learning every song and to being able to recognize the score, you know, just on sound. And, you know, I love it so much. It's one of the ones I've seen live, and I have actually read the Phantom of the Opera book. I read it when I was in middle school, and I still think it's a phenomenal novel as well, but I just think that there's something so atmospheric about the musical, and there's something so magical about seeing it in person and seeing the way that they adapt certain actions to the experience. It's something that's really magical, and I just love the Phantom of the Opera musical so much. It's very special to me, and yeah, just love it a lot. The final ones I'm going to mention, I think, is one a lot of people will say is their favorite film or book to film adaptation. I would be lying if I said it wasn't mine as well. And of course I am talking about the Lord of the Rings trilogy, obviously adapted from the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. So The Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, Return of the King. Hilariously, I actually didn't watch this trilogy until I was in high school. I tried watching The Fellowship of the Ring long time ago when it first came out with my grandmother. I mean, The Fellowship of the Ring came out almost like 20 years ago or something like that. So it's a fairly old adaptation, and I was really young when I saw it, maybe only about 7 or 8 years old. And so I couldn't get into it, and so for the longest time I was very adamant that I didn't like the trilogy. And then when I was in high school, a friend of mine was like, no, 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 no. She was like, I'm not going to let you live your life without watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And so she loaned me her copy, and from there on, it was just a match made in heaven. I fell in love with the story, with the characters, with all of the production beauty that went into making these films. As a film nerd, I can't not appreciate the score and the painstaking effort that went into every costume that they used in this film, and how well the casting is done, and how beautiful all of the editing is, and the CGI with magic, and everything about these I think are just a phenomenal movie. I think a lot of people would agree that the Lord of the Rings film trilogy has its own, fandom around it, separate from the books. I think that there's a whole appreciation for these separate from the books, and it's almost like they have their own life entities separate from the books. But, of course, I have read the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I still really love them, but there's just something that I fell in love with when I saw these films for the first time that is a magic I've never been able to let go of, and I've never felt the way about an adaptation I think that I felt about these, because I just think they're so magic and wonderfully done, and I love them. I love them a lot. Like, I can't even choose a favorite, because there's so many things I love about each individual film that it's like painful to try to choose a favorite child. How do you do that? You can't. Alright guys, so those were my favorite book to X, Y, and Z adaptations. I would love to hear you guys' favorite adaptations, or if you have thoughts on any of these, I would love to hear those as well, and I'll see you guys soon with another video. Bye!